Saw some holiday images of the wards. Had a good family gathering. Just a little while ago, James was relocated at assisted living complex there. It's just right off of Spartan Avenue, Spartan Street, I guess it is, in Carson. Been adjusting to that, but continue to pray always. Remember James. Talking with Chandra this morning. I think they've all been hit by the flu as well, and they've been looking at her and very envious of her healthy pink cheeks, and I think been casting aspersions upon her, saying, well, you're next. You know you're really sick when you hope everybody gets sick. We were sitting at the table at Dan and Liz's on Christmas Eve night, and my phone rang. And it was a member of our family saying that a member of our family had been having, started that day having seizures inexplicably. So we put down our forks and spoons, and that's all we could do. They said, we don't need anything, we just need you to pray. I hope your family calls you when you need prayer. I know God listens when they pray and when you pray too, but Brett Burns, Terry's first cousin, hasn't had a seizure in a few days, but Christmas and New Year's was very difficult. Lots of testing, so forth. Don't know the cause or if they're done. Sweet woman, hard worker, beloved in our family, and the food was still hot and good when we were ready to carry on after that news. Please join us in prayer. Pray for the Dotsons. I think they are getting better. I hope Chandra doesn't get sick. I don't know what your journey has been. Ned and Betsy are back with us. Joan, is your family taking you out for birthday cake today?
No, but here's the best birthday present.
Really? There you go. Good answer. Good answer.
We'll turn that cake though.
Yeah. Shannon, you're looking good. You're looking better. How are you feeling?
Good.
You've had a rough 2024. I'm glad, good to see you. You're sitting between people who love you more than anybody else in the entire world. And your mama loves you more than your dad does. Just the way that is. But Wes is still the favorite. I'm sorry. We're going to be talking a little bit about the favorite today. Johnny and Jeannie were sick last Sunday. Johnny's brother and sister-in-law are Bobby and Starlet Harwell have had a rough year ending. Just pray for them. One thing kind of running into the other. Ron, you've been taking care of much flu. What are you doing for the flu? Injections and drips and things?
Nothing. There's not much you can do.
I finally crawled out of the bed again yesterday. I thought we're okay now. This cough is on. I hope I don't cough at you. So I rolled out of bed and got some decent clothes on. I went in and stumbled through the living room, looked in there, saw Terry and said, I'm going to the doctor. I learned that from my folks. Every time we had a dog get run over with a car, it was just pretty much, I was just a little kid, but that was Spot. So every time we took our pet to the veterinarian, I could see the look on his face, like, how come you always bring me your dog when they've been run over by a truck? Never any hope, So that's kind of the way I said, well, I'm going, that's when we go to the doctor. We have a good family doctor and probably do not do him justice by avoiding him so much. And I got a text from her later on and said, are you at the doctor? And yeah, I'm in the waiting room and we're ready to go in. She says, well, I went to a different one. I didn't think to invite her. Didn't want to invite her. stay in different parts of the house. We both came back with sacks full of medications. We started taking them last night. They asked me 3 times yesterday when I was at the doctor, where do you want your prescription sent? 3 times. Guess what? They sent them to the other place. I got there and they said, well, they're not ready yet. So I waited in the parking lot for an hour, and then when I went back to the window, they said, you know, they didn't send those here. They sent them in Hartselle. They close at 6. You better go quickly. I know you don't care anything about this. This is just therapy for me. It's making me feel better. How are you feeling, Doug? Have y'all been sick?
No.
Good.
Wicked people. They never seem to get sick. They're just too mean.
My wife too.
Ah! There's Ann. She's not only mean, she's old, and she just keeps on going. She just keeps on. Good to see you, Ann. Andy, how old are you?
59.
59. You're almost dead. Used to have a director of missions up in Arkansas. He'd say, smile and say, cheer up, you'll soon be dead. Brother Tucker. I don't have a PowerPoint, Carter. I'm sorry. I meant to say that as soon as I sat down here, I told everybody I was going to tell everybody, I'm going to sit down before I start this time, so if I fall down, I'm going to have as far to go. But I'll probably fall off this step. Open the Power Bible, if you would, to Genesis chapter 50. February almost the very last chapter of Genesis. And thanks for Randy for preaching for me last Sunday. And Danny for going to get Randy. Randy had eaten so much Christmas food, Danny had to make 2 trips to get him over here.
I'm big, but I ain't that big.
I watched a few movies, but those people on the Hallmark Channel are just too happy. I just couldn't stand anymore. I had all the happy endings I could stand. Didn't believe any of them anyway. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, Genesis 50. I spoke with Barbara Fredericks yesterday, and Henry spent all of Christmas and New Year's in the hospital. They've done a spinal tap. He developed several months ago, he had shingles. Every time I go to the pharmacy, they want me to get the shingles shot. I've never had shingles. They say that all of us, if we've had, I think, what is it, the mumps?
Chicken pox.
Chicken pox? If we've had the chicken pox, we're probably going to get, we actually do have the virus that causes shingles in our body. It may flare up and upset. So nerves kind of come to the surface of the skin, and it's very, very, very painful. Henry had this around his head region, and that's what he's struggling with, trying to find out why his sister was plagued with shingles as well, but they're going to do another spinal tap this week, and they're thinking about maybe some physical therapy might alleviate the pain. It sounds like, I don't know what it sounds like, I'm not a doctor. But they're just at wit's end. Pray for Henry and Barbara Fredericks. Liz, how was your sister and brother-in-law? They've had a rough 2024.
Doing okay. Not great, but okay.
I don't know if you know or not, but Alabama did not win the national championship this year. Not even close. And that go. Auburn fans, y'all are kind of in the same place. Y'all been there for a while. Doesn't feel good, but you know what it feels like. I used to have a snazzy sermon when all I did was prepare sermons. I started preaching when I was 14, and I was not ordained to serve. I served several church staff positions. And I did not serve until as pastor until 1977. So for the first 7 years of my ministry, I just preached a lot of revivals, youth retreats for youth revivals. preached for our youth day every year at church. My church, celebrated 200 years just a few months ago, or a month ago. And we were able to go to there and see some of our old friends, and believe me, they really are old. They really are old. But they did their Christmas pageantry. I didn't stop in, but I drove by and they had just a tremendous crowd. Last year, Kitty Hall, one of our great friends, Deacon's wife, was serving at their outdoor live nativity at the Flint Baptist Church, greeting everyone, telling them where the coffee pots and the hot chocolate was, handing out welcome packets, saying hello to everybody. And during that whole process, she collapsed, and they took her to the hospital, and she passed away. Kitty Hall died with her boots on. Got to see her son and daughter-in-law at the homecoming this year. And they told us a little bit more about the details, and they were just then getting ready to set up for this year's pageantry. Years ago when I preached, I had this sermon. It had to do with looking at in the King James Version, the first 5 words of the Bible. The first 5 words in Genesis 1:1, and then the last 5 words. It's got to be this sermon title or this sermon thing doesn't work out unless you do it in the King James Version. First 5 books in Genesis, last 5 words in Genesis. The first 5 words are, in the beginning, God created. In the beginning, God created. And we know all that. If you've read the story, if you read the first two chapters of Genesis, and you know that those words launched the telling of the creation story. The last 5 words in the 50th chapter of Genesis are, in a coffin in Egypt. In a coffin in Egypt. In the beginning, God created, and then after 50 chapters of Genesis, in a coffin in Egypt. There have been quite a number of times this week when I would say, I know why they call it a coffin. Because that's what I've been doing. I've been coughing. Boy, things went off the rails, didn't they? But we can tell if we begin at the reading that God had no intention. It was not a part of his plan. It was not something that he chose himself. He gave us choice that we wound up dead and dying in a coffin in Egypt. And Egypt is about slavery and being a stranger in a strange land, abused and mistreated. Almost every people group in the entire history of humanity has been subjected to slavery, and all of us die. Pardon me. Probably should cover the mic instead of my mouth. That doesn't work. I'll try not to do that again. I don't know if it helps. I don't know if it helps me sometimes to know that. But I think that that's what we're supposed to be at the end of a year. We're supposed to be that's not right. That's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not what God intended. That's not what God made. In the beginning, God created, and he looked back over everything, and every time he looked back and surveyed his work, he said it was good. When he finished doing it all, he said it was very good, and it was. And then he more or less handed it over to us, and we did a job on it. And we wound up in a coffin, not in the promised land, but in Egypt. And we had been slaves for 450 years. I challenge any people group in the entire world to say, well, we were slaves for over 450 years. I just want to take just a moment to look Go down to verse 20. Couldn't pull that out of my brain, Carter. 50:20. Yeah, that camp about right there. I hope it is it's a good suggestion, it's a good practice, but and it may not even have to be advised or recommended, but generally what we do as a people, especially as Americans, at the end of the year we kind of do inventory, we take stock, we say, oh, let's look at everything. I want to talk with you a little bit about this tendency you and I have. We put things in different piles to kind of help them make sense. And a lot of things we said, this was something that happened that was good. And this happened and it was bad. The fact of the matter is, though, that when you and I, when humanity, and we went off the wrong path, we lost our ability to actually see what's good and what's bad. And sometimes we just don't lack the perspective or the distance to be able to tell if something was good or bad. I was listening to a Christian counselor talk to one of his patients once. He was continuing the session out in the hall as they were saying goodbye. Maybe not best to do, but he was saying, if anything good happens in your life, that was from God. If anything bad happens in your life, that was from the devil. Man, I never want to make up, no matter how bad things get, I never want to wake up and feel like, well, I'm in the devil's hands. I don't want to believe that for a minute. I don't want to think, well, God has kind of said, here, you take him for a while. I've done some really good things. You just, here, you take it. No. Even when things are just as bad as they can possibly be, and the darkness is just as dark as it can be, the Bible teaches me that God has me in his hand. He has you in his hand. He's got the whole world in his hand. He's in control. He's in charge. Yes, there's a devil, and yes, he's mean. He's not as mean as I am. I read a story this week. A little boy came to his dad and said, Dad, I just found something. Our teacher told us that all we have to, the Bible says that if we will resist the devil, he will flee from us. I said, yeah, that's right. It doesn't say rebuke the devil. It doesn't say holler at him, throw things at him. It doesn't say to cast him out. It doesn't say to do an exorcism. It says resist the devil and he will flee from you. We need to learn the word no in all of its enunciations. We need to learn how to spell We don't preach a lot about Joseph. Now, I've been talking with Addison. Abraham and Sarah had a son named Isaac. Isaac married Rebekah, and they had two sons, twins, Jacob and Esau. The Bible story, the camera follows Jacob, and Jacob and his two wives and their handmaids, that's a mess, had 12 children, 12 sons. They had some daughters too, but because it was following through the male lineage, it was going to become very, very important that the Messiah not be contaminated with the original sin or all of the proclivities that came with being a human male when he was born, and so Jesus was born of a virgin. But Jacob had 12 sons, and they became the foundation for the 12 tribes of Israel. It's very important in these days, even in these days, to have a very clear biblical understanding of the nation of Israel. You must not get your information about the history of Israel from the modern media, from any of it. There's not a television station or a radio station or a newspaper that I can recommend. But you need to find out, do a little digging, finding out what the Bible teaches about the nation of Israel. The first choice, God chose a man and woman, Abraham and Sarah, to become the first Jewish nation. first of the Jewish nation. And then these 12 tribes of the 12 sons of Jacob. They make the Jewish people today. I don't know if I could name all of Jacob's sons. I know the firstborn son was Reuben. He was the oldest. Grown man here in the Bible. I know that the last of his 12 sons, the youngest son, was Benjamin. Next to youngest son was Joseph. Joseph was a very special and unique person, and God's hand was upon him from his childhood. God gave him dreams. That may sound very mystical and kind of voodoo-hooish, but I think the scientists today tell us we all dream. You may not even remember your dreams. Some remember some of mine, sometimes I don't. I try to determine what I'm going to dream about every night. It may sound odd to you, but it can be done. When I lay my head down, I kind of pick the movie I want to watch. Every once in a while, something will invade my sleep that is not of my choosing. I mean, I don't know where it came from. Sometimes there are nightmares. Sometimes, not often. But I try to have adventures every night while I'm sleeping. I try to learn things. I try to figure things out. I try to sort through things. That's what dreaming is for. Joseph had dreams from God. I think God allows my dreams and permits my life to generate dreams. I don't know if they're divine dreams. It's certainly not prophecy or mysticism. But Joseph would tell his dreams to his brothers. And they got sick of it. They hated him. They hated him because one of his favorite dreams, a recurring dream, was that they were like the world was filled with stars, and the stars were like his brothers, and they all knelt down and worshipped him. Man, and he would tell his brothers that, and it just infuriated them. They hated him. Jacob had a coat made. He had no idea Dolly Parton was going to write a song about it. So he had this coat of many colors, and he pranced around in that. The Bible doesn't say he pranced. But if you'd asked his brothers, they'd probably said so. And they hated him. They hated him. Can you imagine? Even if there were 12 of them, if there were 12 brothers and one of them you hated, you just despised him. That's immature. That's spiteful and wrong. I know it's difficult for all of us to sometimes we all have family and family members that are difficult to live with and to deal with. But they're our family. And some of them, they'll never change. They won't get better. They'll only get worse. It behooves us to step up and to grow and to become the kind of person. There's no doubt in my mind that God placed that person in your family to make you a better person, to make me a better person, to find out what I'm made out of. Unlovely people, unlovable people in our family. They didn't love Joseph. And so they actually just pounced on him when they came out and they were doing their job. He wasn't old enough to be working in the field yet. They just grabbed hold of him and threw him down an empty well. And they said, well, what are we going to do with him? They said, oh, no, we'll decide something later. And they did decide. They said, well, let's don't just kill him. We don't want to have his blood on our hands. Yeah, I hear a lot of reasons. We didn't want to do anything bad to him. And so they sold him to some traveling traffickers as a slave. They were just passing through. They all made a little money. Actually, when they had him thrown down in that well, there was no way it was a dry well, no way for him to get out. Reuben went with that plan because he was the oldest. He had the most sense, probably. He was going to swing back later on when they weren't there, and he was going to haul his brother out. When he got there, Joseph was already gone. They meant business. They were sincere. You know, that would be bad enough. They had stripped that. The first thing they did when they jumped on him and beat him up, well, they took that stupid coat off of him. They hated and despised that thing too. And they just ripped it to shreds. So they went back and got that thing, that old torn up coat of many colors, and they smeared animal blood all over it. And then they walked. This is a terrible part. It makes something bad worse. They took it into Jacob and they said, well, we found this out in the field. They didn't say your son's gone or we killed him or anything, but Joseph looked at that coat and he saw the blood and he said, well, an animal was taken. So they didn't really lie to their father, but they really did. And so Jacob mourned and he grieved. The camera picks up and continues to follow Joseph, and he's sold down into Egypt to a man named Potiphar. He's an Egyptian soldier, an officer. And so he was miles and miles away from home in a place he couldn't speak Egyptian. He was just a kid. He had been a member of a very wealthy family there in the Middle East, but now he was a slave in Potiphar's house. He was trying to learn how to speak their language, how to dress like an Egyptian, and to get on with his life. The Bible doesn't say he was trying to figure out a way to escape. He didn't even know where to escape to or how to escape. All he knows is that he had ridden by camel and walked for miles and miles and miles and miles to get to Egypt. Potiphar's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. He turned into a teenager, but evidently was an attractive young man. And she wanted to have a dalliance with him and tried to tempt him into her bed. And he refused. So she falsely accused him of sexual impropriety. And he was thrown into the dungeon. And he spent several years in the Pharaoh's prison for assault, sexual assault. This is a longer story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. You may know it, may not. Pharaoh had dreams. Well, when Joseph was down in prison, he became well known in the prison system as someone who had dreams, and he could interpret your dreams. And so, well, the story turned out that Pharaoh got wind of it. He was being plagued by these dreams every night. And so they sent for Joseph. And he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams and to advise a plan of action for addressing what God was trying to tell him. A great famine was coming. It was going to be 7 years long. It wasn't going to rain. There wasn't going to be harvest, no crops for 7 years. And Joseph said, make some barns, some storage places, and there's going to be 7 years of plenty. Gather all your grain and put it into barns. And then during the 7 years of famine, Egypt will be the only place in the world that has food. And you'll be able to become wealthy beyond your imagination by selling food to the entire world. It's a great story. Those dreams start coming true, and there's no food in the land of Israel. There's nothing to eat. There's no drink. There's no water, no food. And so Jacob sends his sons, 10 of his sons, down to Egypt. He says, I heard that they've got some food down there. Go get it. When they went down there, they found out that there was a man who was second in command under Pharaoh. He had an Egyptian name. And they saw him from a distance, but they didn't recognize him. It was their brother Joseph. He had risen, and Pharaoh had appointed him to be second in all of Egypt. Second in command, like the second king. And he was instructing the world how to live, how to survive this famine. But those old Jewish boys, they looked just the same as the last time Joseph had seen them. He recognized them when they were standing in line for their